So today we're going to be studying Job 39, and we're going to be looking at something that's really interesting. I believe God has a sense of humor, and he exposes it here in this chapter. Now, maybe I'm reading it incorrectly, but if it was me and God was asking me those questions, I would be laughing, okay? So I was trying to see it through Job's eyes and trying to understand a little bit more of what's happening with what was going on in the situation between God and Job, and the enemy being all around, the angels being all around, the group there, the friends, Elihu and the others. And I just thought, man, I would be laughing. So there are some serious parts too. Of course, we're getting into the idea of being brought forth in the first few verses, and that's exciting because we can know that that can be related to the understanding that we have with the Father and His Son. Anyways, we're going to go into that now. Do you know the time when the goats, the wild goats of the rock, bring forth? And Job could easily say, well, no, I don't know. I don't know. So that's why I told you I don't know, because we're going to read that in some other chapter. I don't remember which one. So remember, there are parallels. So this is the time where the wild goats of the rock bring forth. Or can you mark, do you know the time? Can you mark that time when the hinds, or the wild goats, this is a different term, this is like the cattle. So when the wild goats bring forth, the word bring forth and calf are the same. So the time when you would mark it, when the wild goats or the hinds do bring forth or calf. Now this is really interesting because the bring forth here you're going to see is yalad, which we know is to gender, to a time of delivery, delivered a child, to calve, just like this is said here on this side, but it's actually not the same word as that word calf, because this word calf is not yalad, it's cool. And you can see that's how to say it, cool, right? Now this is really interesting because it's to twist or to whirl. You can see that's what David was talking about in chapter 51 when he was talking about his mother brought me forth in iniquity. But then it's also to bear, to bring forth, to calve, same word, that's what is used here. And that's how bring forth is actually translated, but it's not the same word. But this word calve can also be translated to bring forth, just like this says bring forth, but it's not the same word. So there's two different words that are being used to bring about the same different thought. Okay, now what's really interesting about this one here, we're going to go ahead and right click and search for this key number, and we're going to see, if you just scroll down real quick all the way to the book of Proverbs, we're going to see that in Proverbs chapter 8 verse 25 and 24, it is talking about when wisdom was what? Brought forth. Oh, same as calve, same as the other word yalad, which is to beget. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills was I brought forth. Okay, so that's really interesting because that same word, which is cool, is what this one is. That's, the one that we just read over there in Job chapter 39 verse 1. It's when the hinds do calve, which is the same thing as the wild goats bringing forth. You know what that means, right? That means that God is explaining to Job that the idea of yalad is the same exact as cool. They are equivalent in their thinking. You can in fact parallel in Hebrew poetry the word yalad with the word cool, and it makes the same exact sense. You know when you say cool that you're actually meaning or can mean yalad. And so this idea of God bringing forth his son as cool or wisdom, we know it's related to the son because even Jesus said, wisdom is known by her children, right? We know also that Jesus was made unto us wisdom according to Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 24 and 30. So when you put all these thoughts together, it's like the hinds calving. It's like the wild goats bringing forth. God brought forth his son. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily it's in the same exact way, because Eve was brought forth from Adam. It doesn't actually say that. It's a different word as well in the Hebrew, but the idea is the same. Go ahead and look for it for yourself. Go back and study Genesis chapter 2, and you'll see that a rib was actually brought forth from Adam. The flesh was closed up in its place, and from that rib was formed Eve. The word is builded. Eve was built. It's not the same identical word as formed, but the idea is the same. Eve was formed from that rib. And so looking at these words and how they're used, to me, is really quite interesting, because it's just, again, on a new level, on a deeper level, on a broader scope. It is solidifying the idea that Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, was brought forth from his Father. And that could be referred to as calved. That could be referred to as yalad, which is brought forth. That's why some of our early pioneers used the idea of born. For example, A.T. Jones, when he was writing the message of, or was that Wagoner? I don't remember. When it was the sermon that he had gotten from his wife when she took notes, he used the word born, brought forth from days of old, from days of eternity. And that's the same idea here, solidified through the use of these terms, and I think it's very interesting. Okay, Christ in his righteousness, I think, is what it was. Verse 2, canst thou number the months that they fulfill? So the months would be the time, right? Can you number the months that they fulfill, or bring thou the time when they bring forth? So the word fulfill and bring forth are being paralleled here. The number of months, or do you know the time when they bring forth, when they fulfill? Now, which is interesting, this is yalad. This is the same one that was compared to the kul, right? Right here. But this word fulfill is not the same one. But interestingly, this is called malay, right? So malay, it's to full of, or be full of in a wide application. It is to accomplish, to confirm, to consecrate, to be at an end, to expire, to fulfill, to, what are those ones I was looking at? I guess I was looking at something that I thought was that one, but maybe my mind is skipping me. Anyways, to be full, to accomplish, to confirm, etc. All those things are the same kind of thought as yalad, which is to bring forth, right? So they are fulfilled. The time has come for the number of months. The time has come to bring forth. It can be used in the same way as kul and yalad. I think it's interesting. They bow themselves, they bring forth their young ones. This word bring forth, let's see what this one is. This is the one that I thought about. This is not the one where it's fulfill. This is the one. This is a different word, palak, okay? Now, this is the same context and the same idea of their young ones being brought forth, right? That's what it says right here. But palak is different in that it's to slice like a piece from, to break open or to pierce, to bring forth, as is described here, to cleave like a piece of, almost like taking a rib from Eve, right? From Adam, to cut a little portion off, to shred a piece of, to strike through. So this is a different word, but it's still the same kind of thought. They bow themselves, they bring forth their young ones. You can't tell me they're not talking about the same thing as kul or this other one, what is the word here? Malay. It's the same idea as yalad and kul as well. There's a comment here, interesting indeed, the rock from the mountain. Exactly, that's the thought that I had. The rock from the mountain, the son from the father, the rib from Adam, a chip off the old block, Lynn said, that's good. And they bow themselves, they bring forth their young ones, or I said break forth, it's kind of the same idea. They slice from themselves their young ones, so it's a piece of me, it's a piece of God, it's a piece of you, it's a piece of Adam, and they cast out their sorrows. Casting out would be like bringing forth, right? So that's the same idea, shalak. That would be to appoint, to bring on the way, to cast away, to cast out. It's the same thing. And to push away, think about the woman here, right? To send forth, to shoot out, and to stretch. You know that women, they do stretch during that time. So all these thoughts in the first few verses are talking about bringing forth, calving, fulfilling, bringing forth with a different word. And that would be here in this one, and also this one. So you have all these different ways that God is trying to bring up this idea of him establishing the bringing forth of the various creatures here in the world. Now, I mean, you could say, how did God know how to do that? Well, he's God, right? God knows how to do it because he's God. Well, yeah, but he's also done it himself. That's why he said to Adam through his son, it is not good that man should be alone, because he was there alone by himself. He knew this experience. He didn't just draw that from his mind. He actually went through it, and that's why he brought forth his son. Not to say that God was in a place that was not good, but it was certainly not optimal. If it wasn't, God wouldn't have done it, right? It was in his perfect, I would say it was in perfect accord with his ultimate plan. He brought forth himself, from himself, his son, and that was the best plan. And so the not good there, when it talks about it's not good that man should be alone, I'm not sure how to apply that fully to God, but I think it was his experience for sure. So it's just interesting to see how all these words can be related together, and they all kind of mean the same thing. So when people argue, God didn't bring forth a child from himself, right, but he did bring forth his son, because you can use so many different words to explain that same identical thing that it wouldn't be wrong for us to use those words when it's talking about Jesus Christ being the begotten Son of God. We just learned that there was somebody earlier talking about how they had shared with a pastor's wife these ideas of Jesus being the actual Son of God. And they're like, well, I've never heard these terms. What are you talking about? And it's like, well, John 3:16 actually says that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. And he must have been the begotten Son of God that God sent, because it doesn't say God begot a son after he sent him. It wouldn't even make sense that way, because there was still the him that he would have to have sent. And so, when you break down those words and you try to understand what it's saying, you realize it's hard to get away from that actual meaning that Jesus Christ was the begotten Son of God. And so here, so true. Yep, that was, I think, what we read before. I've had the same thought for a while on it's not good to be alone. God knew what it was like to be alone. Yes. In verse 4 of 39, their young ones are in a good liking. Now that good liking, the young ones, of course, are the children. They've already grown because they've been brought forth. Now they're young ones, right? They're not the being brought forth, so they're already grown. So they go forth. When do they go forth? They go forth when they're young ones. They're older now, right? They're good liking. What this means is kind of like plump. They're bound firmly, right? But plump. That's what it says there. In the sense of to be dumb or to be dreamy. They haven't learned yet all the stuff that you should know, so they're not entirely intelligent. So they're like a dreamer. They're plump, they're fattened up, etc. Happy Sabbath, Jenny, good to see you. And what we have here is their young ones are in good liking. They grow up with corn. So growing up is, of course, the young ones now. They're not little babies necessarily. They go forth when they're grown up. So that's how to connect that one. And they return not unto them. So they're already grown up. They're already in good liking. They're plump. They don't need to come back to their mother. So this is a harder one to connect a parallel. But so far we have seen in verses 1, 2, and 3 obvious parallels, okay? So it would make sense that this one would be a parallel as well. It's a little harder for me to put it together, but I think that's what it's saying. The young ones are a little bit grown up. They're fed with corn. They're fat and they're plump. That's why they go forth, is because they're grown up, and they're returning not to their mother because they don't need to nurse any longer. They're fed with corn, right? They're corn fed. And so in verse 5, who hath sent out the wild ass free? Have you done that, Job? Job's like, no, I don't know how to bring forth. I don't know what time they bring forth. I don't know how to feed them. Like, I don't know what gives them their own understanding to go forth and feed themselves with corn. But you're right, God, you're powerful. You've done this. Who hath loosed the bands of the wild ass? So the wild ass is referred to twice here. They're free. They're loosed. You can see there's parallelism there. Whose house I have made the wilderness. The barren land is his dwelling. So the house would be the dwelling. The barren land would be the wilderness. So again, there's parallelism. He scorned the multitude of the city. So he doesn't want to be in the city. He doesn't like the multitude of people. Neither does he regard the crying of the driver. So the driver would be part of those that are the multitude in the city, right? The driver is there. And the multitude would also probably be making noise, which would be the crying of the driver. Imagine you're talking about so far, there's a comment here, I'm going to take it. Inexperience. Yeah, right. So that's true. They wouldn't have the experience. So then looking at this idea of the multitude of the city and the crying of the driver, you have like a lot of people with what's already been talked about, the goats, the hinds, the donkeys, or the wild ass, etc. You've got all these creatures that have been mentioned, and then a multitude of people and the crying of the driver. Put those together and you've got a lot of shepherds. And shepherds are not normally quiet, right? They're whistling. The dogs are barking because the dogs are helping with the shepherding. They're yelling. They're potentially, hissing, etc. Whatever. If you've been to different countries, Romania, Ukraine, South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, these different countries, they have shepherds. And those shepherds make lots of noise. You can know that there's a shepherd because you not only hear the footsteps of those critters that are in front of them or around them, but you hear them yelling. So that's what I'm thinking is it's again a parallel with the different noise in the multitude of the city with the crying of the driver. And the driver would be the one pushing or leading the shepherds. Whatever is being shepherded. And it is true, there are times where you have the shepherd leading the flock. So the flock follows the shepherd. You also do have times where the shepherd is guiding or herding the flock, right? And so it's not only that we are to be followers of Christ, sometimes he pushes us in the right direction. And I'm thankful for that because I wouldn't always choose the way he wants me to go. But by the time it's done, I'm like, that's exactly what should have happened. So I'm, just bringing up some thoughts here about the scorning of the multitude and the crying of the driver. So again, I think it's parallelism. The range of the mountains is his pasture. Whose pasture? Well, the shepherd, the driver, but also the animals perchance. He searches after every green thing. Now, there you can know some of our friends here in this meeting are from Kenya. There are times where the people in Kenya have told me, Zadok specifically told me, that where we had established a sanitarium, a location, a building that was established for the purpose of being a health location for those in the area, because many of them can't afford a doctor. They don't always understand natural remedies. And if you understand the basics of hydrotherapy, natural foods, intakes, juicing, if you know about charcoal and various herbs, whether they be echinacea or golden seal, that kind of stuff, you can be a really strong force, especially in those areas, for good. In these areas, you kind of get knocked off of YouTube and Facebook, right? But as what happened to my mother recently. But you know that, anyways, when they were, let's see, he leads me through green pastures. That is what comes to mind. Amen. So God is leading us. He's through his son, of course. But you have this idea, I'm trying to remember what it was that I was thinking about. So shepherds often lead their flocks where there are green things. Of course, the flocks want to go that direction as well, so it's mutual. But in Kenya, I have been told that where we had established an institution for health, a sanitarium, some of the workers couldn't go there because there was war in the area. Why was there war in the area? Because of the land. Now, why would the land need to be warred over? Well, because there's grass there, there's grain there, there's various herbs and different things that the cattle, the sheep, and the various oxen and whatever can eat. And so there are tribal wars over the land because there's grass on the land and they need to feed their animals. Now, what's interesting, in different areas, I've been to India as well, and there are a lot of shepherds there too. when you look at the different groups of people, you have people that are warring over against each other, and the reason why is not necessarily because of the land, though it could be, but it's often because of the animals. You see, the Hindus actually worship cows. The specific cow that I saw in the area that I was in India, it's the white cow, big beautiful horns. They paint it, they put different garments on it, they hang things from their horns, and they actually kiss, touch, lick, and etc. the various canals of those creatures. Okay, you can understand what I'm saying. That's part of their worship. They will drink the urine, they'll do it right from the back. They will capture it, they use the feces, etc. This is a real thing. And by the way, if you didn't know, elephants are very, very able to eat lots and lots and lots of vegetation. They will eat whole bunches of bananas. You give them a cabbage, they'll eat the whole thing right there. You give them stalks of vegetables, vegetation, all kinds of fruits, whatever you have in your hand, they'll just take and they'll eat it. And so the excretion is very large from elephants. People will gather that, they will bind it in bags and sell it because people use it to put their feet into. Okay, you guys are like, are you serious? No, I've been there. I know this is true. This is a real thing. And the reason why they put their feet in elephant feces is because it's got so many minerals, so many good things that your feet can absorb, and your body actually heals as a result of this stuff. So I'm just telling you some of the stuff that I've gone through in the different countries. I haven't done it. Maybe one day I will find I need to with that, but not the other with the cows. Okay, I'm just not going there. Anyways, there's war in different countries because some people worship those cows, like the Hindus, but the Muslims, they eat those cows. And so, wait, you're eating our God. Right, we killed your God and we're going to eat it. So what are you going to do about it? We're going to war. We're going to kill you because of our God, right? So there's these really crazy wars, tribal wars as a result of not only land, but worship and what you eat. And so it just amazing. Anyway, so now going back into this study of Job, the range of the mountains is his pasture, and he searches every green thing. Why? Why would he search it? Because he needs to feed those critters that we were just talking about earlier. And if somebody's there trying to take your land, then you're going to war over it, right? Will the unicorn? And this is where God becomes funny, okay? This to me is funny. I think it's actually humorous. The unicorn is not like the unicorn that we've seen so much, but it's a wild bull generally. Okay, it's taken from 720 or 72:13. It's to be lifted up. Somebody who's big, somebody who's strong. Like it's actually ram. So you could think ram here. Okay, I'm not sure if those are the same exact words. Is it a rhino? I don't think so. The reason being is it's described differently than a rhino. So that's one of the questions, but generally online, that's in even searching the Bible, it doesn't seem that it's a rhino, though it could be. Will the unicorn? I'm going to say here it's a wild ox. That's what I'm going to conclude it is. You can think differently, that's fine, but I'm going to say in the context it fits better that it's a wild ox rather than just the tame one. So the wild ox, will he be willing to serve you? Is that something that comes naturally? And you're like, no, of course not. Unicorns were a wild ox that is now extinct, right? I think that's true, but it still was the wild ox, as you're right. So will the wild ox, okay, we got another comment here, cool, okay. Will the wild ox be willing to serve you or abide by your crib? Now the crib is not like, because we could say like, hey, hang out at my crib, that means my home. It's actually a manger or a stall where you would put the cattle. So do you want a wild ox to be, my Bible says ox? Okay, thanks. Will the unicorn, and maybe you can share what translation you have too. Will the unicorn be willing to serve you? And the answer obviously is no. They were considered untamable. And so it's obviously no, it's not something that, it's New King James, it's not something that you would think the wild ox would do, would be willing to serve you. Or would you want him to abide at your crib? Well, no, I'm not just going to feed some wild animal. Can you bind the unicorn with his band in the furrow? Like, can you, the wild ox, can you like bind the wild ox with the band that would be his in the furrow, not before the furrow, but can you do it in the furrow? Well, no, he's going to mess up my furrows. He's going to totally destroy everything. I can't bind a wild ox in my furrow. So the asking of the question, the way it's stated, it's not like, can you bind a wild ox and then make a furrow? It's not what it says. Can you bind him with his band in the furrow? Or will he harrow the valleys after you? So the furrow and the harrowing is kind of the same thing. This is like a bank that's been built up because you've been pulling some kind of, what would you call it? Some kind of plow behind you. And this idea of the harrow would be a harrowed field, something that's broken clods, and it's a ridge that's been built up like a furrow. So again, you've got the same kind of parallelism here, and so the idea is, will he harrow the valleys after you? It's not before you, not in front of you. Will he do it after you? So are you going to be the one that he leads? Can you bind the unicorn in your furrow, and will you be the one leading him? Can you bind the unicorn or the wild ox with the band in his furrow? Will he harrow the valleys after you? And I think that to me is just, it can be funny. If you look at it the way I'm seeing it, to me, I would laugh if I was Job. It's like, no, I'm not going to be like bringing him into my crib because he's going to eat all the food. He's not going to be tame. I can't just go out and tame somebody and then expect him to be bound in my furrow. He's going to make a total mess of my garden, right? And then he's not going to harrow the valleys after me. I'm going to be like not leading him. I'm going to be following him because he's going to be pulling the plow. Will you trust him because of his great strength? Well, no, I'm going to fear him because of his great strength. Obviously not, God. I'm not going to trust him. So another comment here, that would be a sight to see, to plow some fields with rhinos. Yeah, right? It could have been done. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly what the word is. Or wilt thou leave thy labor to him? It's like, tell a wild ox, hey, would you go just finish this field for me? I mean, to me, that's funny. I think that is a actual joke that God is making here with Job. All these thoughts like, no, he's not going to serve me. And no, I'm not going to want him in my crib. No, he's not going to be the one that's going to be tied down in my garden. And no, I'm not going to be following some kind of wild ox, or he's not going to be following me, depending on how you read that. I'm not going to trust him because of his strength. He's going to be, he makes me afraid. I don't like the strength of those guys when they're upset. And no, I'm not going to leave my labor to him. Will you believe him that he will bring home your seed? No, my wild ox is not going to harvest. He's not going to gather into my barn the things in my yard. No, of course not. He's not the harvester. I'm the harvester. So, God, what are you saying? Right? That was that whole paragraph there. Actually, it started not with a paragraph. It was just part of the, let me just see. So we're talking about the wild ass and then the unicorn here in verse 9. But it was in the midst of a paragraph. It wasn't a full paragraph. But he goes to the end of that paragraph. And then he talks about now the peacock. So that's the time where I think God is being funny. I think now that God is no longer making those kind of jokes, if you will. We call them jokes. Is God joking? I don't know, but he's being, I think he was stating things in such a way that he was actually making it, I would think, funny. If Job is in the midst of this incredible trial, and he is at the loss of friends and family, his jobs are gone, he's still itching himself from all the things, the boils that were on him. He's been humiliated by his friends. Elihu and the other three friends have just made it very clear that he doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. God has humbled him by saying all the things that he did too. Job is just like, wow, this is crazy. This is insane. Everything is against me. And then God starts asking these really strange questions about oxen, these wild animals. And I think Job would have been laughing. Like in the midst of trials, sometimes you just gotta laugh. And for me, it's been really healing. Like I think I've said this before during this time that we've been together, but I tend to laugh in the midst of pain. Okay, now what do I mean? When I'm right ready to cry, right before I cry, I'm laughing. If I've hit my knee, you know, when you're like getting into the tractor, okay, and you jump in real quick and your knee just like hits that spot, it's almost your funny bone on your knee. You are laughing. Why are you laughing? You just got hurt. Because I'm about to cry. It's my next step. The other day, I've got this tooth right now that's bothering me, and it's already been capped. But when he took some of the tooth out to cap it, that exposed something that now goes right to my root. And I cannot take hot, I cannot take cold. I had forgotten about it, and I was drinking this, or taking a taste of a soup that my wife had made. It smelled really good. She made it for my mother, and she was like, you got to try this, it's amazing. So we were about to eat, so I was like, sure. I put this hot soup in my mouth, and I swirled it around to taste it, and oh, I tell you, my head lit up because of my tooth, and I went past crying, laughing, and I just had tears in my eyes. I wasn't laughing at this point. I was almost dumb for a moment. I had so much pain. My eyes welled up with tears, and I just stopped and I stared. I just looked at the closet for a moment and was just thinking, ow, that hurts really bad. And then after a while I could speak and I was done out of my stupor. But yeah, so Job was crying. I believe he was crying. But there's times where in the midst of that you got to laugh too, right? And so I think that God was making him laugh. So did you give goodly wings unto the peacocks, or wings and feathers to the ostrich? That's kind of funny, because this seems to me like not necessarily a parallel, but more of a contrast. Because if you know what an ostrich looks like, he's got these really ugly feathers. I mean, if you wanted to mock at a bird, like, okay, what, are you going to try to fly with those things? You would use an ostrich, right? The peacock in the same way. What, you're going to try to fly with those things? We used to have a peacock that would come to our location where we lived in central-ish Michigan. It was a little place called Ludington. I was a pastor there for a couple of years until we were transferred. And so what happened is that, no, actually it was from there that I left pastoral ministry and went into the Chicago Outpost. That's what happened. Anyways, so let's see, Matt is saying possibly God is doing this as a form of comfort for Job. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking that God was kind of making him laugh a little bit. But we had this peacock that would come to our property. We were renting. We didn't, where we're living in Georgia is the first time after 20 years that my wife and I have been able to actually purchase a home. It's such a blessing, but there's a lot of work. Man, I'll tell you, there's a lot of work in owning a home. You know what I'm talking about. And so this peacock would, when you'd pull up the car or walk outside or something, it never attacked any of us, but it would certainly put up its blue feathers. And I'm 6 foot tall, 6'3", almost 6'4". It's actually 6'3 3/4 is really how tall I am. But you've got this peacock that would throw up its feathers, and they were about 5 to 6 feet tall. This peacock's only, like up to my knee, really, but his feathers were huge. Well, he would do that, and he would stand towards you, and then he would kind of dance and turn around, and he would show the back of his feathers towards you. And what it would do is it would show you, like, I'm bigger than you think I am. Don't attack me. Well, he was beautiful too, blue, and those different, I don't know what they are, like circular kind of things at the end of the feathers. I'll probably put up a picture during the time I'm editing this video, but you've got beautiful, beautiful feathers. But you've got an ostrich, and he tries to throw out his feathers, and there's like elbows that come out. They're ugly, and they're like not big and colorful. It's just, to compare a peacock with an ostrich and say it's parallel, to me, is a little weird. So I'm not sure what's happening here, but it seems to me that we have a contrast instead of a parallel. right? Peacocks with an ostrich. And so maybe those are just words that we use. It's an I like to distrust the predator from its focus. Right, it is I like. And I'm glad you said that, because even lions, if you look at the back of their ears, have a very similar kind of eye. Tigers maybe, I don't remember. But go ahead and look that up online. You're going to see when they're faced away from you, it still looks like they're looking at you because they have those eyes. And I don't know if you know this, but if you're attacked by any kind of big cat, it's because they get you from behind. You don't have eyes behind you. And so if you turn away and they see that your eyes are not looking at them, they will come and grab your neck, and then you're done. You're paralyzed, and they're going to throw you back and forth and hit you on the ground, and you're done. But if you keep your eyes on them, they will not attack you, generally, unless they feel like they're cornered. But if your eyes are on them, they will stay back and they'll come close until you turn your eyes, and that's when they leap. So if you're ever in the wilderness and you see a cat, be sure that you have either real eyes or fake ones that you're showing them as you're running away, right? So here it says in verse 14, which leaves her eggs in the earth and warms them in the dust. So that's good. That's a good idea. Instead of sitting on the eggs, she's warming them in the dust, right? But the problem is she forgets them, and the foot may crush them. So whether it's a big wild beast that breaks them or what, but she's actually hardened against her little ones when they come up. Why? Well, she hasn't been sitting on the eggs. She just put them in the dust. So she kind of forgets about them. She doesn't remember that some wild creature could come and break them. But she's hardened against her little ones, because when they come up, she's like, who are you? What are you doing? She hasn't been sitting on those eggs. She will protect them. I've seen those in videos. If you are interested, you can search like people trying to come close to ostriches and to their eggs. And you can put like a bush around you and make yourself look like an ostrich. You can hang your hand up like this, or you can put up something that makes it look like you've got a long neck, and you'll come close to the eggs. You can get them that way. But if you're close to the eggs and the ostrich is near you, the ostrich will run and chase you away. They do know that their eggs are there, but they're not like connected to them as much as a chicken would be to her eggs when she actually roosts on them, right? Because she's there to warm them, not putting them in the dust, but her body is warming them. Well, the ostrich, according to the Bible, puts them in the dust to warm them. The sun will warm the earth warms the eggs come out, and they're like little critters that this ostrich is like, what are you doing here? Who are you? And so I think that's really interesting that the Bible brings that out. The devil is like a roaring lion looking for its prey, those who are not watching, right? So you got to keep your eyes open. Good one. Watch. That's what maybe Christ was saying when he was talking about that in the book of Matthew and Mark, and I think Luke too. She's hardened against her young ones as though they were not hers, because she hasn't been sitting on them, right? That's why. Her labor is in vain without fear. So it's like she labored, but she didn't care for them. And it's without fear, without respect, without care, without the alarm or implication feeling, right? Fear, dread, terror. Because God has deprived her of wisdom. Wow, God actually took the wisdom away. Neither hath imparted to her understanding. So again, I would say that's parallel, wisdom and understanding. Her would be the ostrich that's being talked about. What time she lifted up herself on high, she scorns the horse and her rider, his rider. So this to me would be like she lifts herself up, because you can see there's times where an ostrich will lift itself up to look, because many times their head is down, they're eating, right? But when they lift themselves up to look, they're very tall. And so if she lifts up and spreads her arms, I'm thinking that a horse on the rider would be like, wow, sorry, not a horse on the rider, a rider on the horse, there you go, would be like, wow, looking at and seeing that this ostrich is almost as tall as them. If it's a small horse and a short rider, I think that's true, but unless the ostriches have shrunk since the time this was written, I don't know. But they don't seem nowadays to be as tall as a horse and its rider. But you can see that she is pretty tall, she's pretty big, right? Compared to scorning a horse and a rider. So verse 19, hast thou given the horse strength, Job? Have you done that? Have you closed his neck with thunder? So if you paralleled this one, strength and thunder are the same. And thunder, of course, we know comes with lightning and rain, and we know that comes from the clouds. And so you could put all that together and talk about the angelic ministry, which in the book of Zechariah, is referred to as horses. So again, you could connect that if you wanted to. Canst thou make him afraid as a grasshopper? What would be the horse? the horse is jumping like a grasshopper. Here, scorn could also have to do with her speed. Oh, okay, sure. So scorneth, that would be to laugh, by implication to play, deride, have in derision, laugh, make merry, play, rejoice, laugh to scorn, make in sport. Could be. I'm not sure where you got that, but it could very well be. Let's see here. So he doesn't mourn over the loss of any young. The ostrich probably doesn't. I don't know. That's what it seems like. So I guess we're getting into the mind now of some of the critters. So it says in verse 20, canst thou make him afraid as a grasshopper? The glory of his nostrils is terrible. And you know what horses do, right? When they're afraid of something, they will make that noise. And so if they're afraid, they jump. Because you've seen horses jump. Well, maybe you haven't, but I've seen horses jump either in real life or video. I've been thrown off of horses before because they jump. And at least a horse, I can say that. I don't know horses. Probably I've fallen more than once, but I remember one time for sure. And they buck, right? Yes, they do. And they jump as well. For sure, if you even looked at bucking broncos online, you will see horses jumping quite high. They don't jump quite as high as a grasshopper compared to their height, but certainly they do jump. And from their nostrils, they do make that terrible sound. They paw in the valley. They generally do that when they're upset or when they're scared. And they rejoice in his strength. Now, this would be in the context of armed men, which is going to war. He goes on to meet the armed men. So pawing horses are when they're really, really excited. Like if they know something excited, like a bunch of horses are around them, they might be pawing because they're like, man, I want to run. I'm so excited. I've got adrenaline going on. And that's during the time of war. He mocks at fear. So a horse isn't afraid and is not affrighted. Neither does he turn back from the sword. So he's not afraid of these armed men. He's not afraid of war. He doesn't think ahead of time thinking like, wow, I might be pierced with some kind of spear or cut with a sword. The quiver rattles against him. So he's got like armor on him, and the glittering spear and the shield is on him, but he's not afraid of that. He swallows the ground with fierceness and rage. Neither believes he that it is the sound of the trumpet. So he can hear all those things. He's brave, he's valiant, he's prepared for battle, just like John said, thank you, or Jonathan, I don't know what you prefer. But he definitely is not afraid. Have you made him? He says among the trumpets, ha, ha, and he smells the battle far off, the thunder of the captains and the shouting. So the horse is not afraid. If he's familiar with these things, if you put a wild horse in those situations, they'll probably run immediately. But this is really interesting too, because we get into the hawk, and this helps us understand a little about Luke 17. Does the hawk fly by your wisdom? It's like, no. Does he stretch your wings toward the south? So the way that they stretch their wings, if they were hovering, like so many times a hawk will just fly without even flapping, they'll just have their wings outstretched. That downward, according to this, seems to be the south. Because when they stretch their wings toward the south, it could mean either two things. But it is talking about flying. So when the hawk flies, he's stretching forth the wings, right? So if you paralleled them, it would be while they're flying. But there's another interesting thing. I lived in Squaw Valley, California, which is not far away from the Yosemite National Park or the Sequoia National Park, Kings Canyon. It was closer to that one. But there were a lot of vultures around that area. And I would walk in the mornings, I would get my exercise, etc. And when I was seeing the vultures that were on the telephone poles, in the morning after a dew or the rain, they would be stretching out their wings, and it was not toward the south, it was toward, in my case, toward the east, because it was the sun rising. And they would have their wings stretched out, and they wouldn't like change position when I came by. In fact, what they would do is they would see me coming, and they would just watch me walking under them, and they'd actually move a little bit so that they could watch me going by, right, with their wings outstretched. But they would keep it in the focus of the sun so as to dry their wings out. And the reason being is because they were wet somehow, and then they'd be able to fly better. So I think that to me is not necessarily what Job is talking about, because it seems like if he is paralleling, he's talking about flying and spreading the wings. So here it says, let's see, sunbathing, yes. And man of love, I'm not sure what you mean there, Tebeso, but I'm going to believe that there's my brother, I love you, happy Sabbath from the West. God bless you. Oh, I think it's probably a personal interaction there. I'm not sure. So does the hawk fly by your wisdom? Does he stretch your wings toward the south by your wisdom? No, obviously not. Does the eagle mount up at your command and make her nest on high? So mounting up would be making the nest. The eagle is what we're talking about. And I think this is interesting because we're going to see something in just a moment. She dwells and abides on the rock, upon the crag of the rock, in the strong place. So you'll notice that eagles generally, they put their nest on things that are pretty strong. And I thought it was really neat. In South Africa, they have poles that hold up the wires, for their electricity. And on those poles, they would put large, almost like a crate type of thing with edges on the side. And I was wondering why they do that. And the reason why is because you can see it all down the roads. You drive many, many, many miles, we did. And you just see these different poles with those crates on top that have kind of an edge, like this. And it's because the vultures or the big birds, the eagles, would actually bring and make nests up there. You see, they don't have a lot of rocks in that area, in the flatland places or locations that I was traveling. What they would do is they would just kind of form a strong place for those creatures, and they would actually use them, right? And not only that, but they make these, the bird daubers, I guess, I don't know what they're called, but they would put mud together, and they would start with one little piece of mud and add a little piece, almost like welding. And they would come up with these huge, and I'm talking about like really, really big, like 10 foot tall and, 8 or 10 foot wide homes for these little tiny birds. And they would put them together. And they would hang those off of there too, off of the poles and off the wires and different things like that. Just incredible. Anyways, eagles use strong places to make their nests because they know that their nest is heavy. They got to figure these things out. And so that's why it's saying she dwells and abides on the rock, upon the crag of the rock, the strong place, because God has given her wisdom compared to some of the other hawks that don't have as much, the ostrich that doesn't have as much wisdom taking care of her kids, right? So she dwells on and abides on the rock, and from there she sees the prey. Well, what do you mean? Well, remember, eagles have really good sight, and the Bible seems to indicate that when she's seeing her prey from up on the crag of the rock and the strong place. Her eyes behold afar off, and that's right, because she can see. Her young ones also suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is she. Now, this little verse right here is really interesting because you can find, I'm not going to actually take you there, but I'm just going to put up a graphic that shows, I've got a message talking about the rapture and Luke 17, and we're going to be able to see in that study that little verse that we just read at the end of 39 actually helps us understand a little bit about what Christ was meaning when he was talking about where they are, the eagles shall be gathered together. And those that are taken where the eagle is. What does that mean? Well, go ahead and study that with me and you'll find out a little bit more. But I find this chapter really interesting because God not only has brought Job through these terrible situations, but I think he brought him through now a time where he can just laugh it off a little bit. He's also put in his place. He's not laughing about the horse and the ostrich and different hawks or eagles. But when he talked about the wild ox or the potential rhino, the potential ox that's not there, the oryx or whatever you want to call it, those critters, whatever they were, God was using to kind of, I think, help Job in his experience in a different kind of way. And I like that. It shows to me God's wisdom and his ability to interact with people like you and me. When we go through tough times, man, sometimes you want to be alone, like Job was at first. Sometimes you want your friends. Sometimes you're telling your friends, get away from me. I didn't ask you to come and tell me anything. Sometimes you need laughter, or you need just like sobriety. Sometimes you need to be able to just cry and wail and yell. And all of this is in Job. I think this is an incredible book for social growth and being able to connect with God in a way that sometimes you wonder, does God even understand? I think through this, yes, he does. There's a couple of comments here. And the eye of the eagle can symbolize foresight. Yeah, I think that's true. Hi, Christy. Thank you for that beautiful song. So, Lori, God bless you. And we're going to leave that for her to read. Where the bird, and it's true. Thank you all for your songs, Lynn, too. Where the birds are gathered. Yep, I feel like God is showing the companionship he has with his people. I think that's true, Jonathan. And I believe God is a very personal, loving God that understands whatever it is that you go through. So if you do have a difficult time, Job is going to be a good place to go, to be alone with him, to shout with him, to tell your friends with him, like, go away, I don't need you right now. To be able to cry out to God, like, I don't understand what's going on. To be able to laugh and to cry. So we're going to just surrender ourselves now to God in prayer, believing that this chapter has helped us understand a little bit more, not only about the parallelisms, a little bit about his son, how we can use the different words for being brought forth, or Yalad and Malay, and what's the other one? I don't remember. But cool. And we can also know, as was brought up by Jonathan, that God is one that can relate with us. So I'm very thankful for that. I have so appreciated the book of Job. This has been such a growth experience for me. And knowing that it's applying also to the 144,000, which is our experience in the future, it's good stuff. So why don't we bow together? We will pray. Our Father, I want to thank you that you've blessed us with this time. I pray that you would give us the opportunity to know and understand a little bit more of what it is that you have in your mind for us when we go through trials. We have seen what you've done with the book of Job. You have given us more to understand and more to put into our mind banks of what kind of God you are and how you relate with people like us. I ask that you would lead us, that you would guide us, that you would bless us, that we can, for sure, be your people and right now totally committed to you, so that in the future we can stay your people. We won't be removed from our path walking with you because of some kind of experience that is making it difficult for us. We pray you'd bring us to the Job experience, which we saw in Jacob, we saw in Daniel, we've seen in Elijah, we can see in your son. We pray that you'd please bring us through that same experience where we can be prepared, like the 144,000 or as the 144,000, to go through that experience, which will be very similar. Thank you for this. We commit ourselves into your hands and pray that you would guide our day. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.